Hey, everybody, we are back with another episode of the Wisconsin Investor. And as usual, I have another amazing guest I'm going to be bringing you guys today. We just had a great conversation. We almost forgot to start the podcast because we were talking about so many cool things that are going on that I'm excited to bring you guys today. But before we do, I want to give you guys a little bit of a commercial here for Wisconsin Discount Properties, who's sponsoring today's episode. One of the deals we're going to bring up, we had a deal out to our buyers list recently. It was between New London and Shiocton, kind of in the middle of nowhere on about an acre of land. And nobody bought it on the first one. So I hear a lot of times from people, they say, you guys have too many buyers. I can never get a deal, right? Why even waste my time putting an offer in? Well, here's one that nobody bought. So we ended up talking to somebody who does quite a few flips. They're going to pick it up and they're going to do the flip. And they're expecting to make about 20,000 on this thing and spend about 3,500 bucks in rehab on it. So their profit per hour is going to be through the roof on this thing. So if you're looking for deals like that, we have other ones too. There are big projects. Laura, our guest today, who I'm going to introduce in a second, knows all about the different range of properties and projects we bring up. But go to wisconsindiscountproperties.com, put your information in, and you'll start getting deals sent to your inbox every Monday morning. And with that, let's get into today's episode. I have one of my favorite people that we do business with here. Done quite a few deals together. Laura Ritchie on the show today. Laura, what's cracking today?
Well, just buying houses and have remodels going here and there and have a church multifamily on hold, just a kind of a little bit of everything.
So many things we can dive into today. Before we get too much into the weeds, you just closed on one yesterday with us at the time of this recording, correct?
Yeah, my husband's flying back from Belize, so I have to tell him about that house yet. So spoiler.
Well, this episode won't come out for a couple of weeks, so he'll hopefully
Okay,
know by then. Yeah,
that's
should be good. Should be
good.
good. How did you get into real estate? When did you get started? Give us a little bit of the quick background story on you, Laura, and how you got here today doing real estate full time.
Yeah, so I was like in media my whole life. I kind of ran media companies and did some sponsorships and monetization for publishers around the nation. So kind of like a whole different career. My husband was kind of the head of the state retention NCO for the Army and was working like
Okay.
a gazillion hours a week.
Yeesh.
And really, like a job with a lot of responsibility and stress and I didn't want him to have to work when he retired from the army. I wanted him to have choices.
Okay.
And so, to see what life would be like, when we're not, grinding and, both of us working so many hours and stuff like that. So I decided to like kind of start that little side hustle. And our first opportunity for a house was his mom actually, was in transition and she was getting older
Okay.
and she was going from one house to another and she decided to put her house in our name. And so we actually, it was $100,000 house,
Sure.
but we were able to then leverage, some of that for a down payment on also getting something.
Okay.
So she got her exact house, her whole situation, but then her house was protected from, some of
Uh,
those things that could have, if she got sick or
like
something like that.
Medicare and that kind of thing.
Yeah, protected
Yeah.
from hospital kind of bills.
Hmm.
So then, she had that protection, and she had our house, so she could, give that to her sons and stuff later.
Hmm.
And then in the meanwhile, we were able to have just a little more equity to, buy our first unit. And, then I did a number of like, tradition or, kind of non-traditional financing pieces in order to grow really, really fast and, get to where we are today. So
Okay. And what year was that you got the house put in your name?
So that first one, when I was just dabbling as, just a very light side hustle, was actually 2017.
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool. That's about when I got started. I got started in 2016. So we got started right around the same time. And that's pretty crazy. And then it didn't take you long to be doing this full time. I mean, you left corporate America in 2020, correct?
Yep, January 1st, 2020. So it was only a couple of years. And part of it was like, people like in these groups, giving me like really great opportunities where
Nice.
they, took a chance on me and I was able to do some creative things in order to get into properties that I, like financially banks would have been, like, you had no business getting into yet.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about some of that. Let's unpack that a little bit. When you say you because when we were talking a little bit earlier, one of the things that stood out to me, Laura, is you've through your career, it sounds like through pretty much your whole life, it sounds like you've used a lot of grit, determination, just kind of hard work, like not taking no for an answer to get to where you are today, right? Just figuring out a way. Talking about some of the creative things you had to do, like what were some of those things to be able to grow that quickly, to be able to leave corporate America in 3 years?
Yeah, so that, the first one was, more of a traditional play in some respects. We leveraged a little bit of equity, and anyone can do that, of course.
Was that a HELOC or was that a refinance, or how did you guys leverage that equity exactly?
I don't remember if we just, used some of the equity in that house as the down payment. I don't remember the format of the loan. It was kind of a while ago.
Okay.
Um, and then after that, the next one, there was a 4-unit apartment building. So that first property ended up being a non-conforming 3-unit. So it was a
Oh,
duplex and a house together.
okay.
And I think it was like $136,000. And what I ended up doing is like, I was like, I put it for rent like normal, and I took people through. I'm like, oh, they all want it. And I'm like, this one's pretty nice. I'm like, I think I'm gonna do something else with it. And I, went to the thrift stores, and I, we were like the hillbillies, and we had, harvested furniture. I spray painted it in the yard, and, filled that unit. And, then we got like a client from Nestle in there. And it was like,
Okay.
and then it was like, well, I think I'm gonna do the same thing to the upstairs one. So little by little. And then finally, then time went by a little bit, and I did the house next door. So I had the 3 furnished rentals.
Okay.
And then an apartment building came up. And so, I had my full-time sales job, with NBC. And I think what I did was, my husband's a veteran.
Yep.
And so he was able to get 100% financing on
Mhm.
our main family house. So
Nice.
we ended up cashing out on our main family house using that veteran program.
Okay.
And then we used that like $90,000 of equity we had in our house for our down payment on a 4-unit apartment building. Then I needed to furnish and remodel it. So I took a loan against my 401k at that time while I was
Okay.
working. And then between like cousins and brothers and myself spray painting cabinets, we like, in the thrift storing and all of it, we had our next for, kind of lipstick on a pig furnished housing at that time.
Yeah.
It was so much easier because no one was doing it.
Sure.
And so now, I put like just so much money into these places. And then it's like my lift is like nothing compared to
Yeah.
where it was. Where then, I put my little lipstick on it, and it was like, I can, make double the money with spray paint,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. For
not
sure.
anymore. Like that is not the state of affairs anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was just thinking that I could like spray paint my way to like, riches. And it started
Yeah.
out that way.
Yeah.
um, and then after that, I had a 7-unit. And Jason Lund, who, does similar things to you with like the
Mhm.
wholesaling,
Yeah.
he had gotten, this unique 7-unit property that's almost like condos together,
Okay.
like in its layout. They all had garages. It was an
Oh, like
Oshkosh.
townhouse style.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was like
Okay.
a really neat property. And one of them, was like almost like a garage. One had like hole in the floor, one had like a hoarder situation. There was like all kinds of stuff. And then there was like 4 just kind of, but it was like $600-700 rents, there
Okay.
at that time.
Sure.
And then some that were kind of just somewhat abandoned or whatever. And I was like, I think I gave him $50,000 down,
Okay.
which I got from, I think, maybe another loan from my home equity.
Okay.
And then also like a big commission that I got on like a sponsorship sale.
Okay.
So I put that money down with him, and he's like, I had 4 months basically to get it nice enough to refinance it, pay him the 350,000 he was selling it to me for.
Yeah.
I ended up actually getting 90,000 back at the table.
Nice.
And then that property is now worth like $1.1 million.
Oh my
And it has
goodness.
leveraged me into probably 50 units since then.
Wow, that is crazy. So one of the things I want to unpack this for a second. There was a lot right there, Laura, for the audience to hear. For that one, you did like the ultimate burr. right? Where you bird it, but then you also got a check for 90K at the refinance 4 months later.
Mhm.
Wow. So you paid your, like, think of those of us out there that do flips, right? Like, I'm a big buy and hold person myself, but we flip properties from time to time, right? And I know a lot of people that listen to the show flip properties. We have a lot of buyers that flip properties, but the ultimate flip is the one that you flip to yourself and you collect a check for $90,000 tax free until unless you sell it, right? But in the
Now, keep
moment,
in mind, I did like, that 90 has to pay for like, my flooring and, like that's paying me
okay,
back,
so it's
paying
paying
my
you
home
back.
my revolving debt because
Okay,
I use a lot of that as
got it.
well.
So
So,
this wasn't all 90K coming in the just sitting in your bank account. This was going
right.
back to pay you back. But ultimately, you were able to make these things way nicer, right?
Yeah.
And really improve the property to a point now where you took so you were all in for how much? About 440 into that thing?
Yeah, I kind of feel like whatever I got back, I ultimately put back into it, but at the same time, that thing just continued to like produce equity to be able to get into other things. So I
Yeah.
mean that, a lot of my stuff have been refinanced a million times, and I think people have different appetites for risk, and I think my appetite for risk is like, I think there's maybe something wrong with me that I can't just like let's just get life to the point that you're not having like an elephant on your chest, and you're like you're able to just have like a normal amount of stress. Like I'm not
Yeah.
sure why I need like so much stress that I have to have like four lions ready to rip my throat out at any given time, but I just must need that because right about the time when I think like, oh, I can see like stabilization,
Yeah.
like, a year out or whatever, I do like 10 things that are
Yeah.
questionable.
I
So
know. My wife's like that too. She's like, when are we ever going to just slow down? I'm like, we will, honey. Someday I promise we'll slow down. And then I'm like, ooh, shiny object over here. Let's go do
yeah,
that. Right. Like, that
kind of
sounds
like
like
my
fun.
Amazon cart, only their houses, which is like the worst.
Exactly. Oh, that's amazing. So, but now let's look at the equity on that. So you went, let's say it's worth 1.1. Let's say you were all in for 500,000 just for easy math, right? You
Mhm.
now have $600,000 of equity you created that you were then able to leverage into 50 units, right? Which is the total portfolio of that's got to be worth over 5 million, right?
Yeah, so I'm at 85 units overall
Okay.
across the four businesses. Not that that one property, got into all those, but and I think it's about like 13, 14 million.
Wow, that's amazing. So what I want to unpack there, Laura, because we talked, you just mentioned it. People have different risk tolerance levels, right? And one of the things when I'm talking to a potential new buyer for us or somebody who just needs some coaching or something like that, that's one of the first things that we need to talk about is like, how aggressively do you want to grow? Like, how intense is your desire to get from A to B? Because you're going to do some things like what Laura's talking about here. You're going to get scrappy. You're going to leverage things. You're leveraging 401ks. You're leveraging houses. You're 100% financed on a house. I mean, for some people, that would make them just keel over. And you're just like, yeah, bring it on, let's get as much leverage as possible. I'm very similar. I'm like, leverage the heck out of this and let's keep growing. Because to me, the way I look at it is as soon as I can buy that property, the sooner I can buy that property and get tenants in there, the clock starts ticking for me on building equity, right? The
Yes.
appreciation goes up, the tenant pay down goes this way, and I start to create. I don't know how to do it on the camera. It's all backwards, but you create. I call it the wealth cone, right? You just start here, and eventually your spread just becomes like this, and you can really not know what you're doing in this industry that well, and over time makes you look like a genius as if in the buy and hold thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what you're doing, I'm more probably sided with you, but I know there's people that listen to this that are like, I just want one duplex a year. I'm going to put my 20, 25% down. I want a turnkey type thing, side by side duplex, and that's all they want. And that's great. That's just maybe a little bit slower path to the goal. And that's okay if their risk tolerance is not where you or I's probably is on the spectrum. And I think I may have met my match here for risk tolerance. I think you're out even further than I am on the risk tolerance scale, which is awesome. So I love that. I want to talk about now. Earlier, you mentioned it. You have four different businesses, and the way that you categorized it, I'm assuming means like you have four different entities that do different things, but are kind of aligned, right? And talk about those and what the goal with those is, because I think this is a really cool thing for people to be thinking about. Like, just how big can you? For those of you that are like, gosh, I just got to get my first property, right? It's like, okay, cool. Yes, let's get from 0 to 1. but then think bigger picture of like what real estate can do for not just yourself, but for your family. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about what you've done now with these different businesses and how you've used that to help your family.
Yeah, so my front facing business is Appleton Corporate Housing, and so that's kind of just like my DBA. And then I have four, like you said, LLCs. The one LLC is, my husband and I's, and we have, maybe like 75 units in that one. And then I also do businesses for my parents and my son and my daughter.
It's awesome.
And so with my parents, we were looking at kind of like some salespeople came to their door about, investing and like getting some more insurance policies and something that, financial advising and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And my mom called me, she's like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I basically made her like a little story about splitting hostas because she likes to garden.
Okay.
And I explained to her what I wanted to do for her retirement by basically splitting her hostas. And so
Oh,
she had a little rental that was paid off
okay.
that was down the street. So they had this one little dabble that they had done. But their 401k, if they would have continued their rate of spending, I think they would have been out, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years. They probably would have like tightened their belts and had to, just live differently and whatever. But what I was like, I'm like, if we cash this out and we leverage this little, $100,000 whatever rental that you have, I can get an apartment building in Appleton, and then I will do my furnished rentals there for you. So basically, we bought a building. I completely remodeled it with my team. My team takes all the credit, of course, not me.
Yeah.
Um, and so we remodeled it, we furnished it, we did all that stuff. And now, they have this, little 5 unit portfolio, but they get a $4,000 check from their, respective businesses every month. And that is, just a little more than what they would have had before, between like what they would get with their 401k per month and then the rental that they had.
Yeah.
And so, but instead, that now and we started that in 2021,
Okay.
and now they've gained back that house equity that was leveraged. They haven't gained back the whole 401k that was kind of cashed out, but
Sure.
that, will be caught up in, a couple of years. They'll have gained back the equity that they cashed out on the 401k. But instead of it emptying, like we look ahead 3 years where it would have been like if they had that same rate of spending, they would have been out.
Yeah.
Instead, they have this perpetual, you know, check that they're getting. And, I'm not making any money off this business. So it's just kind of like extra work. But then at the same time, it is providing for my family's future too, because as your parents get older and eventually, sadly, aren't with us anymore,
Mhm.
then, that's also, inheritance that my brother and I will have that has been, an increase in equity for
Sure.
all of our family and the generations rather than a depletion that would have been happening.
That is so awesome. And I think what's important for people to realize here, Laura, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my parents, right? And I don't know their full financial picture. They do some real estate investing as well. We've gotten them started with some things. They do some passive stuff with some real estate investing, or other people that do real estate investing and that kind of thing. But what you're talking about is so important. Like with a lot of the technology and medical advances and AI and all this other stuff, there's a lot of people, depending who you listen to, that talk about our lifespan and how it's going to increase dramatically soon, right? With all the advances. And people who are planning for retirement 10 years ago, they may have to plan much longer now than what they had anticipated, even later in life, if they're fortunate enough to not have any major issues at this point. And what you're doing is you're using the leverage and the equity that they built and helping them just split the hostas. I love that. You're helping them multiply. You took one, turned it to five, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And now that thing doesn't matter what happens in their 4, like you were saying, they can just spend the same amount of money every month that they were spending, but that nest egg isn't depleting to the point. It's
Hmm.
just continually, and it's increasing because of what we talked about with the wealth cone. Eventually, you could probably re-leverage that property again if you needed to, pull some more equity back out and go split some more hostas, or just give them a nice little nest egg to hang on, go play with. right? Go have fun.
Yeah, their portfolio now is at a place that we could do that again. Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely ready that we could do that again. And that's kind of a neat one in that like you don't have to have gotten to that point that you have built your own equity yet. If you're like an investor, in 30s or however old, and you're like, geez, I want to help my parents and I want to help myself, like how can we work together where we take some of my willingness to do the work and be scrappy and hustle, and then use what my parents bring to the table or your parents bring to the table, this equity that maybe a younger person hasn't built up yet, and then you can win together.
Sure.
And I think that can be tricky with families sometimes. Like, well, I have a really nice dynamic, and trust with, and they've also gotten to see what I was building for so long that there was a comfort level there. It might be a little more difficult if you're just starting,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think it's like a conversation really worth having and thinking about with like looking at your parents' retirement.
Totally. And my mom was my first investor in property. So my first duplex I ever bought, I got fired from a job, surprise, surprise. And I had I think it was like a profit share thing that was sitting in an IRA. So I just pulled that out. And I didn't have hardly any gain. So there was really no penalty to pull it out. And then, uh, and then my mom had the rest of it and she put the money in and I gave her, I think 12% interest on her cash or something like that while we were remodeling it until we could refinance and pay her back. And then I think it's like three or four other deals she ended up investing with me in while I was growing the portfolio. So it was great. She got to get a 12% return on her cash that she was maybe earning at the time, like 3 or 4% on.
Oh, that's
And
great. That's a win-win for both of
yeah,
you.
everybody wins and all that. And that's one of the things I think when I talk to people, they're like, gosh, how am I going to get money? And I'm going to use hard money and I'm going to do this. And that's great. Hard money lenders are an awesome resource. But I tell people, like, have as many buckets of money as possible that you can tap into and use them strategically, depending on what you got going on. And you never want to miss a good deal just because you didn't have financing set up or an option to fund the deal. Right. So that,
Yeah,
that's some of the things. And friends and family are some of the best. I know people get weird about asking their friends or family, but really you're giving them an opportunity
yeah.
to grow their cash, as long as you feel comfortable you're going to pay them back, right? That's where
Yeah, that's
Thanksgiving could get weird, right?
That's an area I do struggle with a little, is because like a lot of times there are really good opportunities where I'm like, I know this person, this aunt or this friend or this neighbor or what, whoever it might
Yeah.
be. I'm like, this is a great opportunity where it's like you could make more than what you are, and
Mhm.
I can turn it back out to you pretty quickly. But there is like an awkwardness, like I don't like to sell products,
Right.
and to my friends and family and stuff like that. Not against anyone who's doing that, but I've had to do so much sales so in my life
Sure. Yeah.
for other things that I've tried to like not do so much with my friends and family. But it's like at the same time, if you're like, they can just have $5,000 they didn't have 2 months from now. It's like, once in a while I'll ask, like I'll throw that out there to someone. And I was talking to one of my girlfriends the other day and I'm like, this is how I asked this, but I'm like, but I feel like such a bottom feeder,
Yeah.
just because, you have that, like, are you this worthy investor so that is something that I struggle with when it's people that I know,
Yeah.
because also like the personality of, your like fun island self isn't always the business person
Well, they
also.
know your
So,
history, right? They know all the good and the bad if they know you well enough, right? And they're like, wait a minute, aren't you? This reminds me of a story for those of you out there who read the Bible. There's a good story in there where Jesus comes back to Nazareth and he's trying to preach and he says, no prophet. I don't remember what the line is, but basically, no prophet's worthy in in his own town, or he can't do miracles in his own town because they're like, wait, aren't you the carpenter? What do you mean
yeah,
you're the prophet, right? It's kind of a similar thing for some of us with family, right?
that actually, there's a lot of truth to that, because you wouldn't want to be a prophet like where you went to high school,
Right.
or like I just feel like if I couldn't be trying to like sell investments to like my old high school class. They'd be
Right.
like,
They're like,
like the messiest locker and late chick class.
for one thing I have found, Laura, and I don't know if this is helpful for you, the audience, but one thing I have found that has been really helpful is, again, kind of that mindset shift, right? Of like, wait a minute, I'm actually doing them a favor by bringing them into this. So, like, instead of me chasing them and saying, like, ooh, I'm going to go sell them something, I'm like, wait a minute, I have an amazing opportunity over here for them to help grow their cash. They're getting 3% over here. I can give them 10% or 12% or whatever it is, or if you're going to give them some equity in the deal or whatever the case is, right? Whatever you work out with them. The other thing I've done is the kind of the old third party ask, right? So when you go up to somebody, like if I was going to go to you, Laura, and I needed some cash, I'd say, hey, Laura, I got this great deal coming up. I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to refinance it in 6 months. Give them a little basics of it.
Uh,
Do you know anybody that has some cash sitting on the sidelines and they'd want to earn like 10, 12% on the deal? And inevitably, if that person you're talking to, your aunt or your friend or whatever, has cash sitting on the sideline, they're going to be like, yeah, hey, right here. And you're like, oh, really? Okay, cool. I didn't want to, with family
yeah,
and stuff. But yeah, I would love to work with you if you want to get involved. And inevitably, if they have cash sitting on the sidelines, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It works every time. And you feel good about it too. Like I don't feel
yeah,
ever bad about asking or saying it that way to a family member. It's the indirect ask and takes a little bit of the pressure off and a little bit of the steam off of like asking somebody. It's more of like, hey, I got
yeah,
this opportunity. Do you know anybody that would want to get involved in it? And then boom. They're usually, if they have cash sitting there, they're going to raise it. And if not, they'll go, oh, I don't know. Let me actually, my buddy over here that I know he's always talking about investing, one way or another, either get a referral to somebody else or they'll inevitably want to invest with you. So anyway,
no, that's good advice for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, I've seen it work with some of the other people that's worked for me, but anyway, well, so okay, what does the future look like for you, Laura? So you've got 85 units. You have a church you're working on right now. Talk to us a little bit about the church project. And I know this is for some of you out there. A lot of times we talk about all the successes. This one is one of those elephants on Laura's chest right now. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I bought a church and it was one of my marketplace impulse buys. And I was like not looking at real estate listings. I'm like, I'm stabilizing. I will not allow myself to open any emails or anything related to real estate listings. Well, my daughter sent me a link from Marketplace on this
Ooh,
church. And so
ooh,
I opened it. And then it was like, and it was like, oh, seller financing. And I was like, anytime I can just like not have to call a bank and just like own something, I have trouble not just doing that regardless of what it is.
yeah, it's addictive.
And this church was, it has, it's great. It's a great huge building. It's 10,000 square feet. It's actually 12,000 square feet when you add that third, you take the balcony across part of the
Oh,
way and add that level. Because
okay,
we're doing like 3 full levels.
okay,
And then we are going to take some of the parking lot and make a bank of garages and do a few little penthouses over those. So
okay.
it's a 16 unit project. And we, like just the demo on it, ended up just being like way more than, invasive than what I thought. Like originally I just thought we could just like rough in some units and, and if I would have just rented it to the group of people I had and just let them use that little kitchen and just use the space kind of like I thought I could just right out of the gates.
Yeah,
But instead we dug in and we started demoing and we had this, big vision for what we wanted to do.
yeah,
And the vision of it is my husband came up with the idea of Operation Foxhole because he's a veteran.
okay,
And we want to have this building, this multi-unit, to have first priority to veterans and then, the floors that are handicap accessible, disabled veterans,
okay,
and, have like a kind of a flight of placements where, first of all, we serve, that population and try to, anyone who's looking for housing and those groups. And
sure.
then, kind of open the remaining ones to the
Yeah,
public. So,
that's
so
awesome.
there's like some, positive, there too, but we've actually gotten, I owe so much on this building. It's like very stressful. Um, so it's a situation where I can't sell it for what I owe right now.
Sure.
And so I have to get the financing to get the project done. And the spreadsheets look pretty fantastic. Banks like look at them and they're like, okay, this, the cash flow is there, the end project's there, the plan is all there. But it's just a matter of then, they see that kind of wreck hulk of a interior because you're at that phase where it gets worse before it gets better.
For sure.
You have like, you scrape the bones and you're ready to, just stack your units.
Yes.
And you've done a lot of like infrastructure kind of stuff and bought, like we bought the AC and, heating, cooling and all this boilers and just, we have all this stuff.
Yeah.
But we just need to like get to that next place. So I'm, working on SBA loans and grants and stuff like that. And, I also have been enjoying my life. So there's that has also slowed things down. So,
Yes.
my church right now is just kind of in a holding pattern. While I get long-term financing so I can pay my hard money lender back the initial investment. And
Yeah.
right now I'm just kind of paying her monthly interest. So that's kind of sucking some money out of my pocket in the short term,
Yeah.
but we will get there. It's just, going to take longer, than I thought. And there's definitely more hurdles with having to get like architects and
Mm,
structural engineers and a bunch of things that we weren't aware that we would have to do. But as it got kicked up to a state level from 2 units to 13 units, like everything changes and there's
yeah.
just a lot more involved. So.
Yeah. Do you have to get an elevator and sprinkler system in, or is it not?
So that's one of the other things is like not an elevator.
Okay.
God, I hope not an elevator.
Uh,
But sprinkler systems were something, the sprinkler system, the architect, and one of the things that I'm looking for, so maybe this will go out in the universe. And
yeah.
so the architectural quote that I have is higher than what I want to pay for what I kind of need, because I basically need someone to work with a state that's got that architectural stamp to kind of sign off, because we know what we want to do.
Sure.
And we've had the structural engineer already, to kind of tell us what we can do.
Okay.
But we need the architect basically just to draw what we already know what we're going to do.
Okay.
But then work hand in hand with the state to make sure everything's compliant and we have those like little code things all the way through. And
Got
it
it.
is a lot of hours and the size of the facility, but I kind of need someone who like has that stamp, that maybe worked for a firm, but is maybe independent or between projects, that wants to take something on that can do it for, still a nice price, but a lot
Sure.
less than when you're working with a whole firm.
For
So.
sure. Yeah. Cool. Well, this will go out. So yeah, if you share the podcast, or our audience, hopefully will share this episode with their folks, and hopefully get the word out. Or if they know somebody, let us know. We'll drop your contact info at the end, Laura, and we'll put it in the show notes too. So if anybody gets anything or knows anybody, we can reach out directly to you. That'd be awesome to make a little connection here through the show for you. So what are some things? So you mentioned, is this the first time you've done one of these, kind of bigger conversion type projects?
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like it's been like a negative learning process for me. I don't know that I want to do any more of these.
Yeah.
I kind of like the quick hit of like, it's sort of like my drug where I like, like I can go on your site, or I can, one of my other wholesalers can call me and be like, Laura, I got this great deal. And
Yeah.
then I can like have that impulse buy, like my Amazon card, I can buy the
Mhm.
house. And then, we can send our guys in and I can pick out some fancy tile and we can, do a few things to upgrade it and then get it out there. And
Yeah.
so like those are fun. Like I like kind of like that fast little, hit of adrenaline and,
Sure.
having a new thing that's starting to build equity. Like this long process, like I want to build my empire like, with one trailer of old furniture at a time. I don't think I want
Yeah.
to do like the whole like actually building it.
Yeah, for
So
sure. For sure. You and I were talking about that. I think you and I are more similar the longer we talk, Laura, because I'm like that too. I'm like, ooh, that's why I love wholesaling, because for me, it's just got the deal, sell the deal, got the deal, sell the deal, got the deal, sell the deal. Now, I'm not building any wealth doing that, but it's fun and I enjoy doing it. Same thing with rentals. I love it. I can buy it. I can send my property management company in there to do all the rehab and everything. And then within a month or two, I've got a tenant in there. I didn't have to go in and swing any hammers because I'm terrible at that. So I let them do it all, and boom, I go find the next one. Right, I find deals, I find money, easy peasy. Right, I have a project right now where we might have to demo the house because it's pretty rough, and we might have to build a new one. Well, now we're dealing with the county, and apparently there's setback issues, and so now we might have to move the whole new house to a new slab and all this other stuff. So the costs are just like racking up. Now, I'm okay with it because I do have interest in new construction and thinking about like, what if I just started building new houses, right? It's just another avenue. This is my shiny object kicking in. So I'm learning, and it's not gonna like kill me, but I hate the process of it. Like I don't like rules and dealing with. I'm like,
yeah,
why do we have a 40-foot setback? Why? Who made that rule? This is dumb.
yeah.
I'm just trying to replace the house that was there with a better house. Just let me do it. I don't play well with rules, which is a
Yeah, no,
problem.
I struggle with that too, but I think it's the same exact that personality profile for sure.
For sure, 100%. Let's go back to when you got started. We talked a little bit about this, and when we were talking about having you on the show, one of the things you brought up was the midterm rental environment right now. And so I think this is important for everybody to know. Again, not everything we do in real estate is roses and rainbows and everything's up, 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 up all the time, right? We're seeing this in the short term rental space too, with a lot of our short term rentals. Those have been down the last couple of years. What are you seeing in the midterm, and maybe can you just define what midterm is for those out there that don't know?
Yeah, so we were kind of leaders in the area in that we're with Appleton Corporate Housing, the midterm rental space, which usually the leases are an average of, just like a couple months. And people are here, during COVID, that was a really big thing because you had so many of the travel nurses and there's also contract workers and there's, construction groups, when a bunch of guys come up from Mexico and they're doing roofs, they need a place to stay and um, that motel environment isn't as nice for them as a big house or like a whole apartment building. So there's all different kinds of groups. You've got, assisted living, you've got, all these different people who are in transition that need a furnished place for a certain period of time. And for a long time, when I first started out, since there was no competition, people were either doing Airbnbs or they were doing long-term rentals. Like I said, I was able to, like I could spray paint something and now it's like, making 3 times more money.
Yeah.
But now it's the opposite. So now, I have, like I bought that 16 unit property from you guys, and had I just kept it like it, because it was a nice property,
Yeah.
had I kind of kept it where it was and just like nudged the rents up, I would actually be in a better space with that building than I spent another $1 million on it. And
Wow.
if there's like, waterfall granite countertops and built-in, like if you've not been to my website, like those units are just insane how beautiful
Yeah.
they are. And they
Yeah.
were
I've seen
great for
pictures.
a corporate client when there was that business.
Mm-hmm.
But it got oversaturated because other people, the long-term people saw like, oh, they're making that much money. Let's move some of our places into that. The Airbnb people said it's a pain in the ass to do 3 days and then have to turn it and turn it and turn it and turn it. Let's rent to travel nurses. Well, so everybody got in that space.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point that, you know, I'm including the furniture and it's like I probably could get almost the same exact amount
With
on
the
just an empty rental. So I'm actually trying to get as many long-term leases as I can
okay.
at a lower rate than what I was getting in 2017 with my first corporate rentals that were not this huge investment, that were my spray painting years.
Yes.
So like the difference and where that's gone down to and my lift is, not where it is. Now, you're also talking to me in spring. So spring, Laura, is much sadder state of affairs. I'm like a little more humble, which I'm not that humble.
Yeah.
And just like a little more like beaten down. But then end of summer, Laura, is like, rags to riches. So it kind of
Yeah.
depends on what time of the year that you talk to me.
Yeah.
So
At the time we're recording this again, we have 12 Airbnbs, and most, I think 10 are in Wisconsin. And yeah, it's the same. We're like, oh my gosh, I got to put more money back in that account. I have to fund this LLC again. Dang it, this is terrible. And then
yeah.
it's at the end of summer, fall. I'm like, wow, these Airbnb is the best thing ever. I love it. Yeah,
Yep.
100%. We're very similar. The longer this goes on, Laura, we're like twins, just opposite gender here. So that's awesome. So I think that's important. What was really smart when it was going really well is you bought a 16 unit, which those are valued based off of an income approach. And so when you were talking about leverage, right, what's great about that is you can create a ton of equity by juicing up that income approach, right? If you can get the appraiser to base it off of what you're either projecting you're going to do with the midterm rental rent, which is going to be, again, a lot of times probably what double what you could get for a long-term rent during the heyday there, something like that. And then that juices up your income. And so when the appraiser values it, you're getting a much higher appraisal during the heyday of the midterm that you were doing. But the downside is now, if you don't have those things filled, you juiced up all this money into them and made them awesome, probably best long term apartments in town. But
Yeah.
not going to get quite the return that you were getting before, right?
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
I've got, 5 construction workers from down south that are, I'm taking everybody, like just like 5 individual people that are doing roofs are, going into, a place with granite waterfall countertops.
Right.
And it's like, well, I gotta, you know, I'm
Gotta,
thinking of actually going around town with flyers and everyone who's on a roof being like, hey, I've got some furnished housing for you. Let's get you guys out of these motels and
uh,
fill my open doors. So I think that's my next feet on the ground campaign. So
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get we're I know you got a busy day today too, probably, and we got to get wrapping here. We always like to end with a kind of a fun question, Laura. So we always ask, and this is why we do this, by the way, is we have people outside of Wisconsin that are looking to invest in Wisconsin that listen to the show. And, just for all of us Wisconsinites, we like to hear different spots. So we like to kind of tell people a little bit more about this great state that we invest in if they aren't as familiar. Do you have, or what is your favorite Wisconsin tradition or place to visit?
well, I grew up in Portage, at least like my high school and stuff years. And so my home, like where my heart is actually the Wisconsin River. So
Okay.
we have in Portage, which is like 15 minutes from Wisconsin Dells.
Okay.
We've got like sandbars and we always played a lot of like home run derby on the sandbars and stuff like that.
Nice.
And so we have a cottage in Wisconsin Dells.
Okay.
And so just, like taking a pontoon boat out, or taking one of the Dells boat tours and going into like those majestic cliffs, that is like one of only about 3 places in the world that has like those kind of like rock formations.
Oh, sweet.
And Wisconsin Dells, sometimes people think, oh, Wisconsin Dells, the water parks and tourism and crap downtown or whatever. But
Yeah.
there's like the reason that the Dells became the Dells is because of the majestic beauty of the Wisconsin River. And I go home fishing with my dad all the time, so we catch a lot of walleyes out of that river and
Nice.
then eat them, which is wonderful.
That's a
And
good tradition.
so yeah, just being on the sandbars and throwing something that floats down the river for a few hours. That's kind of,
That's
I think,
awesome.
my Wisconsin recommendation.
You're the first one, and I think you're going to be like episode 30-ish, somewhere in there. First one to bring up the Wisconsin River.
Oh,
So
okay.
we've had the Dells. I think we've had the Dells maybe once, but not in the same light. They had, they were water parky recommendation where I forgot about like we love the Dells and I love doing the boat tour and it's like amazing the different rock formations. We live in Door County, which has some pretty cool rocks, but totally different than what you see on the river in the
Yeah.
Dells. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really good you probably have done that one that like the cave um that cave kayaking trip up in Door County. Like that's a really, really beautiful one.
We had one scheduled and it was like really wavy and rainy that day. And then we just never rescheduled. They canceled it and we never rescheduled it. Sad. I know. I need to
I
do
took
more of
my
the
daughter
tours.
and her niece on that, or my daughter and like my husband, just a other family relative.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was like such an amazing day. So you'll have to schedule that this summer. So
I gotta be more of a tourist this summer. That's it. Yeah. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being on today. There was so much in here. I think our audience is going to love this episode. But if somebody wants to get you that connection to the architect, or they want to connect with you about anything that you're willing to share with them, what's the best way for them to reach you?
so you can email me.
Okay.
And my email is Laura, Laura, at my website address, which is appcoho.com. It's AP as in Peter, COHO.com. So Laura at appcoho.com. And I will say, I do have a lot of furnished rentals available, and we serve, Oshkosh, most of Northeast Wisconsin. We've got a lot in Green Bay, tons and tons in Appleton, and even individual like Kimberly, Kakana, and some of these like smaller communities around here.
Sweet.
And we do work with, if you're a construction company, we will actually house your whole work crew for you. And
Awesome.
take some of those risks. We will accept your pets if you're in transition, trying to find your forever home. So we take risks on a lot of those things that a lot of people don't do, and that's why we kind of play in the middle of what other people are doing.
That
So
is awesome. You know, one other thing I just thought of, Laura, that our audience can really benefit from for those, we run into this a lot with our deals. So knowing now that you just said this, you're in my brain now. And the next time one of these situations comes up for us, but we have sellers, right? Who are dealing direct to seller. And one of the reasons they don't list with a real estate agent is because they don't know their timeline, right? And they don't know where
yeah.
their next step is. They want to buy a new house, but they haven't found their next house yet, or whatever the case is. Those would be great people to connect with Laura about and say, hey, let's put you in one of these furnished, nice places for a couple months, and till you can transition, either find another place to rent or another place, longer term rent or something. So, you're going to pay a little bit more than what you'd like probably on a long term rental, but you're not locked in for a year. You got a short term rental, you're in transition. I mean, it's a great opportunity to kind of bridge that gap with some of your sellers out there that need that next step, but don't want to commit to something long term.
Yeah, I wish every realtor would know who I was, so they could be like, "Oh yeah, we're friends. We'll put you in there for a month, and
For sure.
no worries at all. You're totally covered."
For
So
sure. Awesome. Well, if you guys got value out of the show, share this episode because there's a lot of nuggets in here. Like Laura's talking about, if you guys know some realtors, put this in your earbuds. If you guys know some architects, let's help Laura get that architect here. Let's use the audience here to help her get that person. And let's help some of our sellers out there that need a place to go and transition. And they're going to get that by listening to the episodes. I had a conversation a few episodes ago with a family. They were one conversation that sparked their real estate journey, and now they're able to quit their jobs, stay at home, homeschool their kids, and do real estate full time because of one conversation, right? And I think that's what's important about sharing these episodes is you guys, by sharing this, could be the spark that changes that another family in your network's life forever, just because they heard one of these episodes and it sparked an idea that then got the wheels turning. And we all have that in real estate. We all had a conversation with somebody that got our wheels turning, and then boom, we started this. And you guys, by sharing the episode, could do that for somebody else. So if you like today's episode, share it. If you didn't like it, share it anyway. Because just because you don't like it doesn't mean somebody else will, right? Right, Laura? Get them out
right.
there. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, we'll put Laura's contact info in the show notes, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.